The Investigator's Toolbox is here. Are you a licensed investigator, an investigative or security professional? How would you like to gain work-based skills, be more productive, and grow your business? Well, welcome to the investigatorstoolbox.com. Check out this industry-changing website that's pioneering into the future today. You can network with other investigators in our forums. You can take a webinar, check out a blog, or read an article to brush up on your skills. You can visit our vast resource catalog of research websites and bookmark them in your own private library. Everybody's talking about the Investigator's Toolbox. This really is the future of networking, learning, and resource management. Check this out. For a limited time, we're offering a legacy discount for new members. If you sign up early, we'll save you 25%. Take advantage of exclusive discounts from site partners like Crosstracks, DelphPoint, PI Magazine, Hetherington Group, Scope Now, Parabon, and so many more. Just visit the website investigators-toolbox.com and check out the demo video in the Who We Are section. Can you afford 41 cents a day? If the answer is yes, then don't delay. Join the community. investigatorstoolbox.com. These discounts won't last. That's www.investigators-toolbox.com.
Are you using a case management system? The answer is no. You should really rethink that process, right? So as you guys know, Crosstracks has been an amazing sponsor of the show. They've just been really supportive. As you guys also know, I didn't used to have a case management system. I was the investigator that was fighting them tooth and nail. I finally decided to give it a whirl. What a great decision, right? During the COVID shutdown, I was able to actually roll my whole business into it and get completely up and running. And my clients love it. I mean, just today, I got a phone call from a client of mine who just couldn't believe how easy it was to access everything and how invoices were there. He actually asked me to go back and upload all my prior cases and put it into Crosstracks. I've been doing business with that firm for, about 8 years, so it's a lot of cases. Yeah, if you don't use a case management system, you should, right? You should check it out. Give Crosstracks a shot. Contact Brad or one of the teammates over there, and they'll get you up and running with a trial and see if it's for you. If you have used Crosstracks and it's been a while and you're not happy with the system that you're in, go check them out. They're doing a lot of really cool new things, and see if it's right for you. If you're unhappy with the system that you're in right now, contact them. You know, the ability for them to roll your system into their system is very easy. Again, you guys know they've been sponsoring this program, and I can't say enough good things about them, but make your own decision, right? Give it a shot on your own and see if it's right for you.
Welcome to PI Perspectives. We're back in New York, and Matt welcomes retired NYPD Sergeant John Ferriso from Ferris Investigations. John specializes in missing persons and cold cases. During his career, he's had the opportunity to assist in missing person cases like Etan and Casey Anthony. John has over 20 years work experience and has a passion and a knack for working on missing persons cases. We're back in the New York state of mind with these two guys. So welcome John Ferriso and your host, Private Investigator Matt Spaier.
Welcome everybody to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. Well, finally, we are back in New York. We got two people from New York having a conversation. It's about time. So today's guest is somebody who I just hooked up with recently through LinkedIn. It's only been a couple months. I thought he had a really interesting story and kind of the investigative work that he does. I thought was really cool. So I'm going to welcome John Ferriso to the program. John, how are you?
Hello. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks for coming on. You hail from Queens with your business, correct?
Yes, Queens, New York.
Queens, New York. Okay. And then, so prior to doing that, we have Ferris Investigations now, but prior to doing Ferris Investigations, your career was with the NYPD, correct?
Yes, correct. 20 years NYPD.
Okay. So walk me through your career. Like, how did you get into working for the police department, and how did you end up where you're at now?
Well, interestingly enough, growing up in Queens, New York, it's almost predetermined for many of us to get city jobs. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, there were so many city workers in Queens, New York. as early as kindergarten, I remember writing down I wanted to be a police officer. I remember writing it down as what's your future employment, and I said I would live, I would work, and help people in New York City.
Right.
So I saved it, still have it to this day. But I wrote that down.
How's the handwriting? How's your handwriting?
Well, I was just going to say I had help with that handwriting because it was my wording, because it's still my wording now, but they guided me along. I think they helped me trace it, but
nice.
It was definitely my wording. No one worded that for me. That was me.
Okay. You sure they didn't like subliminally put it on there? You're going to be a cop, Johnny. Go ahead. Just like everyone else in the neighborhood.
Well, interestingly enough, if you went back to my kindergarten class, probably a third of us the boys became cops anyway.
Right. We were talking about that offline, right? A bunch of guys that you went to school with, you all kind of went through together, right?
Sure. As a young kid, I was intrigued by cop shows. And I remember watching the Mod Squad with my father. I distinctly remember them running down the alley, and I thought it was great. These cops chasing people down their dark alleys at night.
Sure.
Barney Miller was a big show I liked to watch. I liked the cop humor. It was my first view of the Detective Squad and what went on, and I really looked at that like, wow, these guys are joking around, but they're actually still doing work. Right. And I saw it that way. It's a great show. Anyone who's a younger audience who hasn't watched that show really needs to put it on and go back to it. So a later show I was interested in actually was Hill Street Blues.
Yeah.
I would say that was the best cop show ever.
That was a big one. NYPD Blue was another good one too. Like the same guy I think produced both of those.
Sure, it was the same people on that. It was I liked the grittiness of it. Hill Street Blues with they had the credits at the beginning and the cop that said, "Hey, let's be careful out there."
Right.
That really, I remember watching that show, late at night on my little television. And like you mentioned earlier, growing up in Queens, there was 6 of us on the block, and we played stickball, and we used to watch the police cars drive by, and I used to see them all the time. And they would just drive by, we would take a break in the stickball game, and I always wondered what those cops were doing in those cars. I knew they were going somewhere.
Right.
I was too young to go with them, but 4 of us out of the 6 of us became cops.
Wow.
Out of that group of people playing stickball. So Queens definitely put out, especially my area, Queens put out a lot of police officers.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. It's really it reminds you of like was it like Rounders or one of those movies where all the kids in the neighborhood stick together where they're growing up. It's cool stuff. A
lot of the movies too. I would go to movies with my father. Serpico was a great movie. Fort Apache to Bronx was probably one of the most realistic cop movies I believe out there. Even though it was very, very busy, that was a very realistic cop movie. The dialogue and Dog Day Afternoon, those were just great movies, and it really inspired me at a young age.
Sure.
But interestingly enough, I used to watch the news too, and the Son of Sam, serial killer, was in this part of Queens when I was a little kid. And I would watch it on the news, and my parents would just sit me in front of the television after dinner, and they wouldn't say, hey, don't watch that. And I'm watching about a serial killer.
Right.
And I was intrigued that there was detectives out looking for this guy.
Yeah.
And I was only 8 years old. And I was wondering how they were catching this guy, and I remembered how they caught him, and I remembered the summons in the car, the gun in the car. I was intrigued by that, and
right.
I really remember the Son of Sam case as a young kid and watching it. Interestingly enough, around a strange time, the Etan Pates case was on the news. A lot of people, if they don't know the Etan Pates case, he was about my age at the time. He was about 7 or 8 years old. He simply went to school one day and didn't come home. Sad case. So I watched that on the news also. And I had a strange fear of being missing at that time. I can't explain it, but it was a strange fear. I guess because I watched it on the news, and again, my parents would explain, that happened in Manhattan. It's not Queens. And if you remember at that time, the news on TV was portraying him as sold into some type of slavery, which wasn't true, of course.
Right.
But fear was there, and I'll get back to the Etan Pates case later. It was something I always remembered, and before I was a cop.
Right.
Later on, as I went to college, I was in college. It was interesting. I was learning, but it really wasn't for me. I bided my time. I knew I was going to the NYPD, so I knew I wanted to be a detective, all that. So by the time I got to 1993, I was a police officer. My uncle had already retired, and my cousin was a cop at the time. So, there was some family also.
Right.
When I got out of the police academy and I went right to working in Queens. And, the first week I was there, you're thrown right into police work. Had an individual stabbed in the neck, walk up to me on the street.
Wow.
And,
here you go, Johnny. Welcome to the club.
Yeah. It was wild. And One of his friends was holding his neck with the blood was shooting out. I was like, wow. And I couldn't believe the ambulance got there so fast. I was like, thank gosh.
Wow.
And then that same corner, while I was working in Queens, I had a gentleman, I watched him punch somebody in the face right in front of me, and I walked over to him. He ripped his shirt open, threw a garbage pail at me, and was telling me to shoot him in front of a crowd of people.
Wow.
I was like, my gosh. I'm like, but this was the job that I wanted to do. My family couldn't believe it. Would tell me stories. My friends, they couldn't believe it. During that time, I would go up to the detective squad with these cases, not really cases yet, but these arrests, and I was intrigued with these detectives. They were solving things, and they had pictures, and they were really investigating work. It was more, these guys did more than just take a report and send a report out. They would actually investigate it. So when I was on patrol, quite often, I would think outside the box, and think outside the box by I would look at the situation and say, there's more to this situation. I mean, what is really going on here? So quite often, I would speak to homeless people in the parks and stuff, and they would tell me a wealth of information. So I said to myself, if these homeless people know all this information, then they need to be spoken to when the opportunity was there. And some officers would come up to me and say, well, don't talk to that guy. He's a bum. Right. I would say, he might be homeless, but this guy's got a wealth of information, and he's telling me, and he's not anti-police, this guy. So I thought a little outside the box. I needed to move on from patrol and go into some type of investigative work. So at this time, I didn't make detective, so I didn't investigate. I went to become a sergeant, and when I was sergeant, I went to Midtown Manhattan, and was working there. And 9/11 happened when I was there, and then it's only half a mile from the towers.
Yeah, sure.
Actually,
yeah.
I heard the first plane hit. I saw the second plane hit.
Wow.
It's only a half a mile from those towers when they collapsed. I guess that's for a different podcast.
Yeah, listen, everybody's got a story from that day, especially from New York. It's could probably do about 5 episodes on that.
Yeah.
But it must have been a crazy time to be in NYPD, definitely.
Yeah, I wasn't in the detective bureau yet. I was still a cop in uniform, and we all did what we were supposed to then. But
sure.
During that time, when the smoke cleared and, the days went by, I started to realize that, I was a sergeant in the NYPD, but I never became a detective. So it was, interesting that you're a sergeant on patrol, you're a supervisor, but you're not a detective. So I did a lot of interviews and tried to go different places, but I didn't have the experience. I didn't have detective experience. I was very knowledgeable on the street, but I didn't have detective experience. So Colonel Faz called me. I had to give them my 2 years. You give how the NYPD does it. If you give Internal Affairs 2 years, you can go to any type of investigative work you pretty much choose. So went to Internal Affairs. It was never the type of work I wanted to do, but I learned quickly how to do investigations. Officers involved, there was still a lot of bad guys involved, so we had to investigate them. And I was amazed at how these guys that soup sergeants who were once detectives, they could solve these cases and get to the bottom of the story so quickly. So I met some good people there. I met some good workers, but I found work distasteful, I guess you would call it, because you are investigating police officers. So whether they're right or wrong, nobody wants to investigate police. So did my 2 years there, and then I was offered the Missing Persons Squad, which is in the Detective Bureau. Right. So it's called a specialty unit. So I figured the way to go. Yeah. So I went over to the Missing Persons Squad, and I knew when I got there it would be a lot, because they have a lot of cases there. Right. I think they have a minimum of 7,000 cases a year when I first got there.
That's a lot.
It seems like a big number,
right?
But the 7,000 cases is everything from a runaway out of a group home who just walks out the door and comes back on Monday to just somebody who just goes to the bar or goes to the club and doesn't come home in the morning and never did it ever before in their life. So there is a large group of people in between, but those cases are, what they would do is the detectives in the precinct would get the case, and then if the person doesn't return in 7 days, we would get it. So we helped them with the preliminary investigation, but I would say about 90% of the people returned within 7 days. Right. It was that 10% that we really had to dig into, and that's when it went to the Missing Persons Squad.
Sure.
We had a lower number than those 7,000 for the year, but we put a lot of work into that. So I was a sergeant there, so I was finally able to just think outside the box on these cases, do things a little differently. Sure. But one thing I realized there is my supervisor called me into the office, and he told me, he said, John, we have the Etan Pates case here, still an active case. So I was brought back immediately to like being 9 years old,
Sure.
And I was like, wow, this guy's got the Etan Pates case. And I saw the kid's picture. It was the same picture I had seen growing up. And they had some suspects, and, they had who they were looking at. And, I obviously didn't go and tell everybody, that I remembered watching on television and everything. But,
Yeah.
I was like, wow, the Etan Pates case.
Brings you back, right?
Yeah, it brought me back. It was interesting that I was like, wow, they got this case. So the detective who had the case, he wasn't directly assigned to me, but he sat down the aisle from me, and we talked often about the case. And he told me all the old interviews and everything. And the FBI would come into the precinct, and they would take DNA from, I don't know exactly how they were trying to get the DNA, but they were trying to get the kid's DNA from 1979.
Right.
It's interesting because this is, so many years later. This is going back to about 2010, I believe. And, DNA was not around, obviously, in 1979. While I was there, I just went into work one Saturday morning, and phone rings. So, like any other morning, one of the detectives picks it up, and I hear him talking. He's like, yes. And he looks over to me. He goes, this person knows who abducted Etan Pates. And I was sitting there. I couldn't believe it. I was like, really? And then that started the investigation right there, that phone call. And it basically was someone, a detective, willing to listen to someone.
Yeah.
And that person called, they seemed sane and they seemed legit, and we had to listen to them, and that's what started the investigation. So it could be something as simple as, and the gentleman needed, he wanted to be heard, and he was, and that's what, I had little involvement with the actual case itself, because it went to the detective who had it all along and his supervisor. But it was pretty interesting to see all those years later, to be actually involved in that.
Small world, right? Yeah, it's very, very cool.
Went full circle in a strange way.
Yeah, that's very cool. So, hey, listen, we're going to jump out real quick for a break. And when we come back in, I really want to focus in on the whole missing persons investigation, because that's kind of what we're talking about here today, and the real passion that you have behind it, and some of the ways that you do approach things a little bit differently. I know you covered a couple items, but everybody sit tight, and we'll be right back.
Want full data access without a site inspection? IRB Search gives you full Social Security numbers, dates of birth, up-to-date contact info, and so much more without the inconvenience or cost of an inspection. As an added bonus, you can access IRB data on any device in any location. You'll always have the best data anytime, anywhere. Visit irbsearch.com and use exclusive promo code PIP Podcast 2020 for a free trial and 100 credits. Offer available for new and returning customers. Do you work with an insurance agency that takes the time to give you the personal attention you deserve? Well, contact Michelle Knoll and her team to get the best customer service and attention available. You never need insurance until you really need insurance. Keep yourself and your business protected. Contact Michelle at mknoll@amoscorp.com. Amos Insurance. Did you hear about the latest issue of PI Magazine? Well, check out the cover feature on the Investigator's Toolbox. You don't want to miss this great issue. It's available today. What do you do when you get calls for bug sweeps? Did you know USABugSweeps.com, the #1 TSCM provider in the country, pays you a 20% commission for converted sales leads? Stop turning money away. USABugSweeps.com uses top-rated technology, and they cover all of the United States. So save time and make money today. Contact USABugSweeps.com and mention PIP20. So have you signed up for the Investigator's Toolbox yet? I have. What are you waiting for? Don't miss out. The legacy discount is ending very soon, and you'll miss an awesome opportunity. Are you serious about growing your business and increasing your knowledge base? Well, register today at investigators-toolbox.com. Use code PIP20 1836 and save an extra $15. And now back to Matt and his guest, John Ferriso.
Before we jumped out for a break, you were telling us about the Etan Pates case and your passion here for missing persons work and the work you do with the Missing Persons Squad while you were in NYPD. You walked us into how you got into the squad there. So how did NYPD approach these types of investigations, and what were some of the soft skills that you picked up there that you translated into your own business when you went out on your own?
Well, the NYPD, it's not exactly like television. You know, you have to wait 24 hours and this and that. If a person is missing and something's not right, you know, they're going to be considered missing. So not every missing person is like, you know, the high profile cases you would watch in the movies or television. A lot of them is just, you know, they fall into the runaway, you know, the 15 or 16-year-old runaway. Unfortunately, 3/4 of the time, I would say female. There is the elderly, which have some type of mental issue. So, you know, that's a different type of case. There's the one with the spouses. You might have a husband or wife who's reporting someone missing. Those cases are rare, but those cases really need to be looked at.
Right.
And unfortunately, you have, you know, people who just don't come home, and then we find out later on it's a suicide.
Right.
Even though it's a suicide, originally it is a missing person case.
Right. I guess it starts off that way, and then you gotta look at all the facts and see where it takes you, right?
Yeah. What I would say is for any investigator out there who has any type of missing person case, and I believe this would go in any case, first thing you have to ask is, why did this person leave? Why did this person run away? Unless it's 100% foul play, which is very rare, there's a reason for them to leave. And whether it's a mental issue, a drug issue, a family issue, there could be abuse at home, there's a reason why they left. And if you find out the reason why that person left, you're halfway into this case.
Right.
Because if a parent tells you, well, you know, my daughter ran away because she's with this older gentleman. Okay, so right away you know that she's probably with this older gentleman. And then you have to, this is where I think a little outside the box is, you have to ask them the direct question. And you could be right, you could be wrong, but you have to say, is it possible there's prostitution involved?
Sure.
And you'd be surprised how many times if you didn't ask that question, they wouldn't tell you. Because who wants to say that their child is involved in this? And quite often, this is like where television has it correct. You have an older predator who finds this person, buys them clothes, gives them money, says, do you want to be my girlfriend? And they're the girlfriend for a few days, but a few days later, they're a prostitute servicing numerous clients in a hotel.
Right.
So, you know, you have to ask the direct question, and then you have to go to this person's social media, because quite often they will meet this person online. So, you know, if the parents are telling you the truth, and I say the parents, it's not always the case, the parents, it could be roommate or whatever, or a friend, and I'll get to that, the friend. When you answer the direct question of why they left, and if they're honest with you, then, like I said, you're halfway there. And then you have to make sure they're not lying, because quite often, for whatever reason, they might want to hide something. If a person has a gambling problem, they might want to hide it. If there's a mental illness, there's a mental illness, have they taken their medication? Because if you have a 65-year-old guy who's not taking his medication, he has been home in 3 days, and he's not in any of the hospitals, you have to start checking the morgues or other areas where he could have ended up.
Sure.
So really, once you ask that question, you are really pretty much on your way with those cases. What starts to happen is they don't usually return right away. So if they don't return right away, you have to keep on looking for them. And one thing I would do is, now social media is so prevalent right now, I would find out, like, say, Facebook or any search group, if they have 50 to 100 friends, save that information. Write their friends down. Write their names down. And you write all these names down, the friends. And the reason why you do that is because this person might delete themselves off social media, and they may be hard to find. But once you've got the friends, you have a contact with that. And a best friends quite often will unfortunately know either where they are or what they're doing. Yep. And so the best friend knows more quite often than the mother.
Yep. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. One thing I used to do is, I learned this only in missing persons, is I would talk to the parents. I said, listen, where is your son? And they would go, I don't know, just left the house. He leaves every Friday, comes back every Tuesday. I was like, okay, well. So we would say, what's he doing, what's he doing? But then when we look at his social media, we see he's talking about skateboarding. Social media, skateboarding. Talk to two of the friends, hey, where do you guys skateboard? Friend goes, well, you know, there's a park in Manhattan where we skateboard. So sure enough, you got to look in those parks in Manhattan where they're skateboarding.
Right.
And you get that all off the social media. And no one's going to directly tell you that unless you search for it. or ask it. And it could be as simple as the skateboarding angle, and then you find the kid skateboarding, and you say, "Okay, Mom and Dad are looking for you. You gotta come home."
Yeah, I think it's a combination of using those, using social media, using technology, but also having those skills of knowing how to have a conversation with somebody too. I think somebody that excels at this type of work really understands, the people side of it and that connection. And that's something that you had referenced earlier before, talking about your experience back with NYPD, how you identified that as a skill set and really worked on crafting that, because that is a dying art, right? Having that ability to have, the comfort level of whoever you're questioning. There's a certain skill to that, and that's something you either have it or you don't, right?
You're 100% correct in that. You have to have that skill set of speaking to people. Now, it's more than just speaking to the person. It's you have to kind of, I guess I'm going back to my police work, when you have to be nice to everybody, but you have to ask the direct question.
Yeah.
And you have to, you speak to them as a parent. Like I would tell people sometimes, I would say, "Listen, I'm a parent just like you are. Tell me what's going on. I understand." And then usually they'll tell you, and sometimes I might break down and tell you and cry, but they'll tell you the story. Like I had a woman once who had a tracker on the daughter's phone, and she kept calling me up. She's at this location, she's at that location, and when we go to the location, she wouldn't be there. We go to this location, she wouldn't be there. And then we saw a pattern where all these locations were prostitution locations, and I had to tell the mother. I said, "Look, listen, I'm not sure. I'm being honest with you, but I think your daughter's involved in some type of prostitution."
Yeah.
And that case did not, she did not give me the clues to find that child. But that would be a good example of if you mention that to them, then they would tell you, "Well, there's this guy, and we told her to break up with him. We didn't like him." And then you would have this other angle to look at. And what I just said with this guy, what I would often do is if this missing person, usually the runaway, doesn't want to speak to me and they delete me off their social media. Now I'm going back to police work, NYPD, we did things a little differently there, but they would delete me. They wouldn't want to speak to us. We were NYPD. So I would have their friends. And I know me and you talked about this at the Society of Professional Investigations after dinner one night. We spoke about that when, I would go up to the friends and I would say, "Listen, she's 15 years old. Where is she? I don't know who she is." "Well, okay, well, you're in a lot of pictures with her. Just, you're not in any trouble, but she needs to come home." And then I can't tell you how many times that person would return because the friends would put pressure on them.
Yeah, like,
say, "Listen,
this John guy's harassing me. Will you please go home?" That stuff happens. It's real. Yeah.
I had an individual, and this was back when I was in internal affairs, where we called his mother-in-law so many times where he called me directly late at night in the office. And I'm not going to do his accent, but it was pretty funny. And he used the word "bro" numerous times. And he said, "Please stop calling my mother-in-law. I'll talk to you." And he did an interview on the phone because we had called his mother-in-law so many times that it was causing problems for him. He was just like, "I just got to talk to these cops, so they'll leave me alone."
That's hilarious. You remind me of a case that I worked on many years ago. It's probably about 12, 13 years ago. It was one of these missing person things that turned into an MVA. So there was a girl who lived in the Bronx, and she ended up getting hit by a car in Nassau County. And it was one of these deals like, how did you get out to Nassau County? Like, what were you doing, right? And there was some mystery behind it. Well, it turns out she was hanging out with a quote-unquote friend who was some record producer or whatever. They were hanging out at a hotel, just hanging out. And for whatever reason, she had to go across the street to the 7-Eleven to buy something because they were just hanging out, and proceeded to get hit by a car, which was terrible, and she was injured significantly. But, having those conversations of, "Hey, you got to be honest with me and tell me exactly what you were doing out there, because to me, this sounds like there were some transactions taking place while you were just hanging out." And it turns out that's what was going on. And just by sheer dumb luck, while just hanging out, had to go across the street and got hit by a car. So that was a very interesting case from a while ago.
You have to dig deeper into the story because people aren't just going to come out and tell you 100% of their story.
Right.
I had a case. Actually, in the missing person squad, when they used to give us, it wasn't a direct case, but we would have to assist. And this is when I started doing quasi-PI work as I was a sergeant in NYPD. It may sound strange, but I was doing PI work because I was sometimes working with PIs because they were calling and they were asking for our assistance, or I was getting cases that weren't cases, but yet I was told to work on them. So it wasn't a case number, and it wasn't like, I had everybody breathing down my neck, but the work needed to be done.
Right.
And, I was getting these letters and these phone calls, and the name sounded familiar. And I said, why does this name sound familiar? And I Googled it. And this was going back some years now. I remember the years. And it was Casey Anthony. And if anyone remembers the Casey Anthony case, it became a big case. There was a missing kid. And this is when the kid I believed was missing. I don't remember exactly because I didn't have much dealing with it. Right. But I was getting notified by this person, and he had this whole story about how there was these individuals in New York, and they left in the 70s and 80s, and they left under suspicious circumstances. I think maybe they were accused of something, and now they're in Florida, so they need to be looked at for this. So I told my supervisor, I said, these people aren't being honest with us. And, their intent was to try to get us to, I don't know what their intent was, just to do something else that should have been done. So I contacted the investigator in Florida, and I said, I'm not touching this. This is not what I do. But you need to know that these people are reaching out to me to look at these people. I don't know what happened with it. I'm sure there was, they never looked into it, but that was just an example of, I wasn't being told the truth. And if they're not going to tell you the truth, the people making the case, then you're going to have a hard time investigating it. That does happen sometimes.
Oh, it happens more than you would like it to, It really does. People, they try and, I guess, plant seeds and steer things in certain directions. And if you can stick to a good methodology and have a good, hey, I got to, do it this particular way, you're going to bust those theories every single time. It doesn't stand up. But yeah, I think it happens a lot, actually.
Yeah, I saw it quite often in the NYPD, and I haven't seen it yet in the private investigator field, but I have helped others in the private investigating field out of state. I haven't physically helped a lot of cases because I'm licensed in New York State, but I had an individual in Texas, and he had an interesting case when elderly man, 80 years old, just left with his truck. They never came home. No sign, no nothing. So he was stumped on it. He reached out to me through social media, and he said, John, what do you think? So I went through the whole case on the phone. And this is all ad hoc. I mean, I have a talent to missing person cases. I have no problem helping people if they feel, they needed help. And he was honest. And, this private investigator, it was, I don't know how many missing person cases he did, but I doubt he did, the 7,000 a year like I did. So me and him were both correct. And because I told him I had a case once in the NYPD, similar, when an elderly man left, and we tracked where he was going. I believe he was going from Manhattan to Rochester or New Rochelle, one of those. And his car went off the road, and they found him on the side of the road. So it was an accident, and that is common, unlike the suicides where people won't come home due to an accident.
Right.
So this individual in Texas, I told him, I said, there are people who, could check lakes and rivers. This is Texas, so they don't have a beach and stuff like that. I says, you have to track where he was driving. And sure enough, there was a small department in Texas. He called me up, and he said, John, he goes, you were correct. And like I said, this investigator also felt this was the same thing. They found the man's car off the side of the road in a lake.
Wow.
So accidents do happen, and people report them missing, but unfortunately, it's just a tragic accident. And that does happen with elderly people more often.
Yeah, and you're able to give closure to the family, right? By being able to at least let them know what happened, right? Just approaching things differently. That's really cool. Very cool way of looking at things.
Well, like you said, closure to the family. That's correct, because these families they want an answer, and I'm honest with them. It's not like television. We don't solve things before the hour show ends, but it does happen. Believe me, it does happen. I mean, there's times when we catch this guy right away. We're like, wow, we found him.
Right.
But I would tell the family, I'm going to do my best here. I'm going to help you out. I'm going to look into this. I can't do things unethical. I can't do things illegal. There are people who watch way too much television. Like, I watched a lot of TV growing up, but I realized there was like certain Magnum PI stuff that just wasn't possible. I couldn't do that. So there was things that, but when you give a family closure, it's a good feeling. It truly is. I had an individual once when he traveled from New Orleans to New York, and he just didn't come home. He was living here in New York, and his friends were like, his friends in New York were like, listen, he's gone. We don't know where he is. Really wasn't an NYPD case, but he did have cancer at one point, so they said he's sick. And I mean, so we took it, and I asked him, what's his vice? And they said, what do you mean his vice? I said, the man's vice. I said, not everybody, but let's face it, the man ran away. What's his vice? Is it gambling? Is it prostitution? Is it drugs? They said no. And they said, well, he used to be an alcoholic. So I said, okay. So I got the honesty. I asked him direct questions. So I was halfway there with that right there. Right. And then once they said he was an alcoholic, I remembered they knew he was using his ATM. So me and a detective one day just went out to where the ATM was, and I saw a liquor store. So I walked into the liquor store with his photo. And this is where I think some people are getting it wrong now, is people think that all these missing person cases could be done behind a computer. You really can't. You have to get out there, and you have to ride the subways. You have to go to the parks. You have to go to the liquor stores. Right. So I went to the liquor store. I showed him the picture, and the guy looked. He jumped back. He goes, the guy was just in here buying a bottle. So I said, all right. So now we know it's him. I said, are you sure this is him? They said he bought a bottle. They said he walked out and made a left. So I walked out and made a left, and there was an old school cheap hotel in Brooklyn. Who knows if it's still there. And sure enough, I saw the hotel, and I saw there were 6 apartments, and I told the detectives, these are one of these. So I showed it like in the movies. I showed it, the picture, to the guy at the desk, and the guy at the desk was half asleep with an old TV behind him. Right. And he said, yeah, that guy's upstairs. So I went upstairs and knocked on the door, and sure enough, he answered. And he's like, how'd you find me? I said, well, your friends care enough to report you missing. Right. And, it was sad. He was an elderly man. He did not want to come home, but, thinking outside the box, finding out what his vice was. Sure. Found him. And once you get back to closure for the family, it wasn't his family that reported it missing. It was actually his friends. And I called the friends up. I said, listen, I'm not going to force him to come home. If he wants to drink in a hotel in a crappy area of Brooklyn, that he could do that. Sure. But I gave him the apartment number. I gave him the room, obviously the room apartment number. I told him where it is. I said, this is where he is. I told him his friends were looking, and I even gave him his own missing persons flyer. So he had his own picture. There you go, right? Proof. So I'm figuring he's going to use it as a coaster when I'm gone. Right, there you go, right? Yeah. So, and sure enough, it was back to closure around Christmas time that year. I got a letter sent to me in the NYPD, and I was, we don't really get letters sent to us, and when you do, you're a little skeptical. Yeah, right. Is there a subpoena in there or something, right? Yeah, it's a subpoena or somebody you don't want to talk to. Maybe some anthrax. You gotta be careful. Yeah, I mean, cops were so suspicious of that stuff. So right. I opened it, and it was a Christmas card from that gentleman, and he said, basically, you saved my life. He goes, I was drinking my life away. That's awesome. And he said, you did the work and you found me, and thank you for it. He said, if you've ever reached out to someone and helped them, I was the person. I was like, wow, that was great. And I never spoke to these gentlemen again, but It was a good feeling to give the friends closure, because good friends like that, to go through all that, to report their friend missing and actually go and show up at this hotel to find them, was that's the type of closure that many police officers do like. It doesn't come often, comes rarely, but when it does, it's important to, at least in missing persons, to really reconnect people at that point. Yeah, I got to say, I have a huge amount of respect for investigators that do this. And I find the folks that do really have a strong passion for it. Like for me, just dealing with the whole family issue, knowing in the back of your mind that's probably not going to turn out the way they hope it's going to turn out. You got to be a certain type of person to be able to walk somebody through that. And it's just, you're starting in it's an uphill battle. It's almost like you're behind the 8 ball. Time is obviously of the essence on these cases, and it's just such a mountain to overcome. But it's real inspiring, actually. How you approach this and how you do it, and how you have a real passion for it. I'm sure you probably saw, during your time on the force, people that needed help, but the NYPD wouldn't help or couldn't help. Right? It didn't meet that certain criteria or standard for you guys to do what you needed to do, but you knew that, somebody needs to help these guys, right? I got to think you probably had that feeling, right? Yes, that does happen. There's a lot of gray areas. And with private eye work, I'm sure with any type of private eye case, there's gray areas. Not everything is cut out as this person left on this time and they're not home and they're supposed to be home. Right. There's a gray area on why they left and where they left from. Sometimes you're not even sure where they left from. And that's a big thing. Did they leave from the house? Did they leave from I mean, if someone goes to a club late at night and they are hailing a cab and they're never seen again, they didn't get lost from the house. They get lost outside the club. And we had cases like that where they met the wrong person and foul play.
Yep.
And it was a homicide. But it was originally a missing person. But when you start to find out that they got a ride from the wrong person, so that's a good example of they're not missing from home, but they were missing from somewhere else. And that's a question you need to ask, because they're out of their element. They're somewhere else at that point. And why are they hailing a cab intoxicated late at night on this busy avenue?
Yeah, I remember there was a student at John Jay College. God, it must be maybe about 10 years ago. Had something like that happen to her, and it was just like as they figured out exactly what happened, it was horrifying. Really horrifying. Just out drinking with friends, wrong place, wrong time. Somebody, a predator saw the opportunity and pretty much executed her. It was really really crazy, and it's a crazy line of work, but definitely something that, if you're doing it, like I said, you definitely have a passion for it. So tell me, I mean, we talked a little bit about social media. We talked a little bit about some of the other tools, and you've been doing this for a while. And what are some of the other things that you've seen change in this type of work? And or maybe tell me some of the things you think that are coming down the pipe here that may make your job even easier.
Well, it always seems like it goes back to social media. And when I was first began investigations, I mean, I remember taking, we would take pictures when I was Internal Affairs Bureau and a prisoner had a broken hand. We would take pictures with a Polaroid camera, and we would record his statements with a cassette. And this wasn't that long ago, but that's
Exactly.
going on. So
it wasn't too long ago. You're right.
But what I will say is we still got the job done.
Right.
So with social media, especially with Facebook, I mean, like I said earlier, you could finally find all the friends of this person and their posts, and there's pictures of them at a New Year's Eve party. So okay, we have a timeline. They're at a New Year's Eve party. Who's the 5 people in this picture with them? Okay, that's this friend, and this friend. So you could tell the friend, listen, you're already with them at the New Year's Eve party. Where were they the next morning? So I saw social media evolve, and I embraced it a little reluctantly at first, but I embraced it. And I had a supervisor tell me once on the phone. He goes, because I was a supervisor, and he was talking about detectives, and he goes, these guys want to search social media, but no one wants to knock on the door anymore. So, and I was always a little different. I was always the guy, listen, they're swiping their MetroCard, we got to go to the subway. They're hanging out by the school, then we got to go to the school and talk to the school security. So social media is huge. It's a huge tool, and it probably will close a lot of your cases. But, and this is where private investigators need to understand, when it comes to a missing person case, it is very hard to do that entire case with social media. You have to, especially the cold cases, older cases, because the social medias are deleted. The people have moved on. They may not be friends with that person anymore on social media, if they ever were a friend to begin with. So when it comes to missing person cases, you have to, you'd be amazed at how many times that people have found, if someone wants to be homeless and not with family, he chooses to live, or she chooses to live in Lower Manhattan, you have to go to the soup kitchen.
Right.
And, people aren't going to be taking videos at the soup kitchen and putting it on social media. Hey, we're all hanging out.
No, they're not checking into the soup kitchen and taking photos of their food. That's not happening there.
No. And if their friend has a mental issue and laying with, how you put that? Yeah. But laying with the blanket over him on the side of the road, that's not going to make it to social media. So you have to get out there and you have to talk to homeless people and show them the picture. Yeah. So I see investigative work as becoming more social media platform, but the seasoned investigators who I believe saw it before the social media started, we're so used to being boots on the ground and out there doing the old school work. I feel that is a huge plus for any investigation, because anyone who, has a case, or anyone who hires someone to do a case, that person needs to get out there. And if they could find them on social media the first day, case closed, that's one thing. But I find it that social media can only go so far.
Yeah.
So that's why a big part of my work is actually getting out there and doing the interviews and speaking to the right people and doing the surveillance and looking for them where you believe they are.
Yeah, and I think you can source information other places too. So like going to OSINT and maybe finding newspaper articles about a missing person or whatever. Sometimes you can find nuggets in there of people that interject and respond to the stories. You know, like you have the potential, you could find an eyewitness. You're like, oh yeah, like, wow, this is so crazy about this person that disappeared from that club. I go to that club all the time. Like I was there that night. You know, like they'll interject and they'll put something like that in there, and you're like, oh, bingo, okay, this is somebody I definitely want to talk to. Where, you know, you never would have found that if it wasn't something that was prevalent on the internet now. So I think you bring up some good points, John, that you really have to mix the two, right? And I think the successful person knows how to navigate both of those worlds and really capitalize. But yeah, there is a good deal of in-person work that needs to get done on these types of cases. You know, the face-to-face is really, really important. And, you know, these days you just got to include a mask, you know, so one of the other challenges of getting this type of work done in this environment. So we're going to wind down over here, but before we do, you have a hobby too that I want to talk to people about. So tell me a little bit about this other thing that you do.
Yeah, interestingly enough, while I was in the NYPD, you know, I always thought outside the box, and I used to take notes and I used to write down things, and I didn't always tell my coworkers I was doing this, but I have a lot of short stories, and I compiled a bunch of them, and it's a lot of humor. It's I read so many cop stories where they catch the bad guy and they chase him to the street and they knock him over a garbage pail. And, you know, those stories are great, but they've been told so many times. So I throw a little humor into my stories, and I have a bunch of stories I compile, and I guess I had a good memory, and they were a lot of the stories were patrol and obviously missing person cases, and I write them down and I show them to friends and family, and they read the stories they're interested in them.
Great. We got to get you on John Hoda's podcast. John does a whole podcast on interviewing like true crime writers and things like that. So keep at it, and I'm sure he'll be contacting you at some point, and he'll want to chat with you. John, how do folks get a hold of you if they wanted to talk to you about you know, a missing person case that they were struggling with, and maybe wanted to bounce some ideas off you?
Sure. I'm glad you said struggling because, like I said earlier, if someone's struggling with a missing person case, like if they've never done a missing person case, listen, we all have to start somewhere. I get it. I started a missing person too. Or if they are at a brick wall and they need some angle to look at, they could contact me. And if, you know, obviously if they're out of state or out of the country, I can't physically help them with it. If they're in New York, you know, I could physically help them with it. But if a state, I'll spend my time and I'll really give them some advice on what they should do or need to do or need to look at.
Sure.
So if anyone needs me, any of my services, my name of my company is Ferris Investigations, and they can reach me at ferris.protection@gmail.com.
Yeah, we're going to put that in the show notes too. So
they could also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on social media. Perfect.
Well, John, this was really great. And
okay.
I appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk about this subject. I think it's one of the niches in our industry that not everybody does, but the folks that do it are very passionate about it. And I'm sure you've got a wealth of information available for folks out there. And I just want to say thank you again for coming on and talking about this stuff. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we'll catch you guys on the next show.
Well, this was a very interesting show, and thanks to John for coming on, and we give him a lot of credit for the investigative work he does. Thank you, John, for your service. You don't get more New York than this guy. Well, unless you're talking to this guy. We also want to thank Amos, Crosstracks, IRB, and USABugSweeps.com for sponsoring the show. Have you checked out investigatorstoolbox.com yet? Remember, it only takes 41 cents a day to unlock the future of investigations. Make an investment in your business and yourself today. 25% legacy discount won't last long, so use code PIP201836 to save even more. If you got a question or comment about the show, email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. You can also find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. We want your feedback so we can bring you the best shows possible. We'll be back next Monday with a new show. Make sure you tune in. Stay safe out there, everyone.